Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Things are getting hot in the GNU, and John Steenhuisen has made an announcement that the Democratic Alliance may pull out of the Government of National Unity if the Minister of Education, Siviwe Kgarube, is fired. Today we saw two different newspapers running with the issue of whether or not the Minister of Basic Education will be fired for her insubordination or her disrespect or her undermining of President Ramaphosa. And all of this is coming to a head because Friday the 13th is going to be a big day in this coming week. Friday the 13th. It's not going to be, Halloween, but it may be a dark day for the GNU. And it's going to be going into, the festive season proper, because the festive season is going to start a little bit after that proper. After the 16th, everything basically dies down. So Friday the 13th is going to be a big marker for how the GNU ends 2024. Why is this a big day? Friday the 13th is the deadline for the BELA Act provisions to be signed off by the president. Remember, the president said he was giving 3 months for the parties who had issues to work together with the ANC and the government to finalize what the provisions of the BELA bill they didn't like would look like. This was after AfriForum and Solidarity reached out to him via WhatsApp and the bill was being signed. The ANC and the DA stand on different sides of this fight of the BELA Act. When the bill was being signed, the Minister of Education did not show up in protest. She said, I'm not coming to this thing. I don't support this bill. That was strike one for many people within the ANC, within the coalition partners of the ANC. They were like, your minister who you appointed, sure, recommended name by the DA perhaps, but still, you appointed this minister. She has undermined you by not coming to the event of the bill that you are signing that pertains to her department. So that was strike one. The leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen, went to the Footrekker Monument with Solidarity and AfriForum to protest BELA. And that monument in and of itself is symbolic. It was a declaration of war. Fundamentally, from AfriForum, DA, Solidarity, they said to the president in no uncertain terms, we will fight you on this issue. The Footrekker Monument was a monument that was used by the National Party to rally nationalist ideals, to rally apartheid ideologies. So when they chose that monument to go and say to the president, we oppose you changing in any shape or form the language policies at these Afrikaans medium schools, that was a declaration of war. For many within the ANC, that was strike two. And it's a strike that even though the Minister of Basic Education didn't go, it counts on her side. It counts towards her because this is her department. That's her leader. John is her leader. And she kept saying, we're going to implement the bill. We're going to implement the bill. We're going to implement the bill. But many were concerned. So we've spoken about strike two now. Then for many, what was strike three was that she released a statement saying that the dispute on the provisions 4 and provisions 5 of this particular BELA Act had been resolved with Solidarity, which is an Afrikaner Workers Union, at NEDLAC. And she said that, we've made a deal, NEDLAC has solved this issue, I'm going to make these recommendations to the president. And essentially the deal she made dilutes the powers of the head of department in changing language and admission policies when there's a contestation around those language and admission policies, right, with the school governing body. Because this all traces back to a case, long ago case from 2007, which was the Emelo case, where this school wouldn't let, the HOD change the language policy so that the school would be bilingual to teach English and Afrikaans medium to make sure that the Emelo community could have access to education, because that one school, whose school Emelo, which is Emelo High School, had about 500 students, had a capacity of 1,000. The schools in the neighboring areas, all government schools, including Emelo, had over 1,000 students, and some of the classrooms had over 65 people per class. So the department said, Your school has got capacity. It's an Afrikaans school. Everyone doesn't want to learn in Afrikaans. Let's go middle of the road. Let's make it this a dual medium school. You teach in Afrikaans, you teach in English, and then there'll be provision for these kids. The school governing body said, no, this school was founded in 1914. It's an Afrikaans school. It will always be an Afrikaans school. We're not going to actually entertain that. They said, if you want to help those kids, you can teach them in a disused laundry that we've got over here. Teach them in the laundry. That is all what precipitated this particular legislation and where we are right now in history. Right? So, Minister announced a diluted bill. And for those within the benches of the ANC who were looking at this, they said first she didn't show up. Then John went to the Futrika monument. Now she's signing a bill undermining you. That's strike three. She's got to go. And why we're seeing now these calls, apparently the National Working Committee of the ANC is saying, no, this minister must be removed. And in the ANC, they've got a slogan, high morale, high discipline. High morale, high discipline. High telepansi, bambu mthetho. And they're saying, this person akabambu mthetho, yadelela lo muntu. Deleli president, mongameli, ongapheli. Ay, makatrambe. That's what they're saying, fundamentally. So the minister has already been facing pressure and has been chastised and chased by the South African Democratic Teachers Union when she tried to address them. And she herself, has said she's going to implement, but people are not convinced necessarily because of all of these actions. So that's where things stand right now. And John has now jumped in on the back of the reporting. This afternoon, John Steenhuisen has said the removal of the Minister of Education will lead to a collapse of the GNU. He said that this is a red line. And in so doing, he's actually created a tricky dilemma, a Nelly and Kelly, if you will, for President Ramaphosa. Because if the president doesn't do anything about Minister Horube, John is going to be viewed as having told the president what to do, to be co-piloting the presidency. To show that the DA has a bigger say in this DA-ANC coalition, which the ANC has been insisting is the government of national unity. If John can tell President Ramaphosa, this one doesn't go, I'm going to tell you now, that's not going to look good for him in the ANC, and it's not going to look good for the people that he needs to keep happy in order to stay in power. And nobody presides by themselves. You are part of a team, you're part of a party. Anyway, this is what the statement from John Steenhuisen that was issued this afternoon says. DA leader John Steenhuisen issued a statement. I'm trying to find my place here in my notes. Issued a statement and said that the DA rejects any attempts to fire Horube or any other DA minister for doing their jobs. The statement goes on. The DA rejects any attempt by a faction of the ANC to influence the president to fire Minister Siviwe Horube or any other DA minister for doing their jobs. Doing so would signal an end to the government of national unity. Went on to say, this is amid misinformation around the consultation process which has been taking place since the president signed the BELA Act into law nearly 3 months ago. Withholding clauses 4 and 5 to allow for further consultation from concerned parties. These consultations are ongoing through the clearinghouse mechanism within the GNU. John Steenhuisen also added that Minister Siviwe Horube had met with Solidarity and the presidency at NEDLEC after a dispute was lodged by the union. Said this process is entirely separate from the consultation process and conflating the two is misleading and factually incorrect. This was a mandatory process in terms of the law to prevent strike action arising out of the dispute. The outcome of this engagement was a settlement signed by the Minister of Basic Education, the presidency, and the union. The fact that the presidency has now distanced itself from this legislative process, which they were party to, is as disgraceful as it is confusing. Bum, 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 bum. Hey, that's an insult right there in diplomatic terms. Let me read it again so you hear it. The fact that the presidency has now distanced itself from this legislated process, which they were party to, is as disgraceful as it is confusing. They're calling the presidency a disgrace, in other words. That's what that means. Disgrace Mugabe. That's what they're called. He further added, as leader of the DA, I would like to make this point clear. We support the process followed by the minister, as she was fulfilling her legally obligated responsibilities, and respect the outcome of the negotiations at NEDLAC. These are fighting words from the DA. Now, I want to just quickly reflect on some of the things that they're doing here. First, they say they reject any attempt by a faction of the ANC. So what they're trying to do here is to create a perception that, it's not the whole ANC that doesn't like this. It's just Abo Panyaza who don't like this. And they're saying this faction is trying to who is this statement for? It's for the markets. It's for the donors. It's not actually for the ANC. And it's not actually for parents who want their kids to be able to go to schools in these areas, right? It's for donors. It's for the markets, because those are the people who are fundamentally are going to give the president a call on the side and give him their view. We know that now the markets have got a big control over the value of the currency and the continuity of this coalition. So it's important for the DA at the door, as they enter the door of the statement, to say, no, this thing is being done by a faction to influence the president. It's not the president who wants this. It's this faction, this problematic, radical economic transformation faction. So that's the first thing that they're doing. The second thing that they do, which is quite clever, is that they create this pretext that these things are happening without coordination. What things? One, the solidarity threatening strike action and lodging a complaint at NEDLAC, the meeting with the minister, and the deal that eventually gets signed. When the presidency meets with Solidarity and DA, they are meeting with two people who are working together on this particular issue, because they already went to the Futraka Monument together before this strike action was initiated or threatened. So the clever thing is the DA then says, well, our hands are tied. Solidarity was going to strike in the schools, and this was going to affect exams, and we can't have a strike, so we had to make a deal. And the deal is one that kind of reverses all of the provisions of the sections that you guys just spent 10 years trying to make law. But it's not us, it's Solidarity, the minister just signed. So that's the first thing they do. Then the second thing that they do as well is that they muddy the water. And in this muddy the water process, they also want to isolate the presidency from the ANC. So at the beginning, they're like, no, it's a faction, which is saying that the minister must be fired. Then on the other end, they're like, but the presidency was involved in this thing. They were involved. They took part. So now, why is the presidency acting surprised? Like they don't know what this thing is about. Like they don't know what this whole thing has been about. So that also in and of itself is a divide and rule type of idea. Because on the one side, you say, no, the problem is the faction. On the other side, you say the problem is the presidency. Now, these two groups, if your plan works, look at each other with distrust, because people are looking at the presidency saying, no, but when I sign, and the president's like, no, I didn't sign. And they're like, no, but why are they saying it's a disgrace that you are leaving the process and it's confusing? Are they telling the truth about you? And then on the other side, people are going to ask the president, so this faction of the ANC, Obapanyaza, they're really controlling you. And in that division, the status quo continues. That's the beauty of divide and conquer, divide and rule. This is why it was a preferred strategy. If you get the elephants to fight, the grass suffers, you continue doing whatever. So we'll see if it works. But it's very clear what the three level strategy is. Level 1, blame a faction. Level 2, blame the presidency itself, so that there's confusion and fighting within the ANC. Then level 3, distance yourself from the sequence of events and make it seem as if you're a neutral actor in this whole thing, as if all that the minister was trying to do was to prevent this teachers union from going on strike, and that they formally lodged the process and everything is just being done in accordance with NEDLAC. And then also, as a final part of the strategy, then also say, no, we're still working with Mashatile, we're still working with the clearinghouse, don't conflate and confuse these things. But everybody saw you at the Futraka Monument together. Everybody knows that you're working together on this thing. Everybody read your campaign manifesto. We know you oppose the BELA Act. We know that you were with these people. John already was with this group. So the facade does not hold up. The facade being the painting that you're trying to put on this building, because we saw the construction happening over time. So, final remarks. The BELA issue has become a proxy war for the future of the ANC, and the DA is actively trying to create divisions or to escalate divisions between the Mbalula camp, the Lessufi camp, and the presidency to see where the cracks are, where the power players are, who's who in the zoo, who are the stars. So this has become a proxy war, even within the ANC, and the DA is trying to exploit that proxy war for their own benefit. That's the first thing I want to say as a closing remark. The second thing I want to say is that it's now going to be very hard for the president to give the DA what they're asking for because of the way that they've politicized this issue and undermined him in various stages, even the statement today. When you start going to the media, when these things start showing up like in the newspapers like this, you put the leader in a very tough position because they have to preserve their face, their integrity, their credibility as being in charge. Once a leader is viewed as not being in charge, then all of the power players come and find ways that they can remove this person, right? So the bill came from the ANC. It came from the ANC subcommittee on education, health, and science. And they worked on this for a very long time. It's gone through various ANC conferences. And this committee, the ANC Education, Health, and Science Subcommittee, has very powerful members who sit on it currently and former members. And it's something that cannot easily be undermined and thrown away, because they will have a voice around whether or not the president held up the ANC resolutions at conference, etc. So that's number one. Number two, the bill has got powerful and vocal supporters. I mean, Panyaza was speaking about this just the other day, recently, I think yesterday, and this is what he had to say about what happens if this bill gets diluted. And, you know, it's very clear where he's going with this.
If we can allow the BELA bill to be diluted to be something that is not what it is, comrade, we have betrayed this revolution. And on this one, comrade, it's no retreat, no surrender. I want to urge COSATU, the SACP, SANCO, and all structures of the ANC, especially our education-based formations, SATU, COSAS, SASCO, the Youth League, YCL, and all other formations. If there is a period that we need to stand together for the sake of our children, that never and never again that our children will be denied quality education on the basis that they don't speak Afrikaans. And never again that our children will be denied access to an Afrikaans large school that is next door where our parents stay, purely because that particular school has been declared a no-go area for our children. If we can't defend that as a collective, comrade, and if we can't defend that as alliance, if we can't defend that as progressive forces, comrade, then there's no justification why we exist as movements. We need to reclaim the African National Congress. And the message is very simple. If they are not ready to genuinely discuss the amendments that they want to make, if they think they can go through the back door and seek agreements that exclude majority, on the 13th of December, we have no choice but to plead with our president, implement the BELA bill the way it is. We'll face the consequences of taking that particular decision. We are not apologetic. We're willing to listen, but it's quite clear that we are dealing with tricksters rather than people that genuinely want to deal with the issue. You can't hide behind a broomstick when you are a racist. We'll expose you. So our commitment, therefore, comrades, to the BELA bill and related bills like NHI and many other things, we need to conclude those processes and implement those processes without further delay. So, comrades, we wish you well.
I like the Minister of Basic Education. I think she's done good work in some elements of her job. She blocked that massive tender, which didn't make any sense, where they were going to put the whole school feeding scheme under one company, and it was worth billions, and it was approved while GNU was being negotiated. So in that respect, I gave her a big salute. In addition, I think it is something honorable to try to work on resolving the issues which we are seeing with the pit toilets and all of the school infrastructure backlogs that continue to exist. There's nothing harmful about that. But having said that, I think that the National Working Committee is correct to make this call. From their perspective, for action against the minister, she has effectively, whether you like her or not, she's undermined her boss maybe too many times, because she's undermined the president when she didn't show up to the signing of the BELA bill. She undermined him when she released this deal that had been signed at NEDLAC in a manner that made his office look bad, incompetent, or contradictory, or disloyal to the ANC, whatever. The fact that he had to then get into a position where he had to distance himself from the deal that was made shows that whatever she did and how she did it wasn't in his interests. So when you are the National Working Committee of the ANC, you're correct to make this call from their perspective, right? We have to be fair. We have to be balanced. They're looking at their president being undermined, being disrespected, being, outmaneuvered, or people trying to outmaneuver him or to close his room to make independent decisions on this issue as the head of state and as the head of the executive, right? Because he's supposed to make the final call, but they're trying to make it very difficult for him to make the final call. It's their job to do that, right? They are the opposition within the GNU, if you will, right? Because they're still trying to occupy that opposition function as much as possible. But the NWC is correct to say, hey, talk to this DA leader, John Steenhuisen, and see what can be done, because this is not going to work for us. As the ANC, this is going to cause us problems because, one, we've made a resolution, we've done this work, all of this stuff was passed, signed by you, it's law now, look at what's happening, you're being undermined. Then there's also the big issue about what it looks like if this doesn't get done in the way that they fought for it. Because on the other end, the other left parties will come and say, look, they sold out. They said they were doing this other thing and they didn't end up doing it. They got undermined. It's exactly what Tito Mboweni was talking about in his SMSs to that other guy. And that's a story for another day. But he was basically saying DA1 checkmate, right? So that's something that I think we all have to think about from the perspective of the National Working Committee of the ANC, whose job it is to uphold the interest of the ANC in between conferences. They're correct to say this minister is actually undermining us, right? They are correct to say that. I think fundamentally we need to appreciate that the BELA Act is an opening fight to the main event. This fight affects the Afrikaans schools. Not all of them will have these issues show up. Not all of them will have to have issues around school admissions change. Maybe a lot in Gauteng, but not everywhere around the country. Many parts of the country where you have these types of schools are really homogeneous parts of the country where you've either got large white populations or large black populations where this is not really going to be an issue. Or in other parts of the country, many of the black people in those areas also speak Afrikaans, so it's not an issue. This is not as big of a fight as it looks at face value. And even the issues that are being debated now are relatively small in terms of like how will the HOD make the decision? What triggers the HOD making this decision? A lot of the BELA Act is actually not being contested right now. It's a few provisions that are being contested, but the symbolism of it is important because the main event is coming up. And I think this is why there's a lot of testing to see how to fight these issues within the GNU, because what the DA really is afraid of is the national health insurance. This is going to be the biggest fight because the national health insurance basically means an end over time to Discovery, to all of these big medical aid companies with their big offices in Sandton, etc. And many people in middle class, in the elite, have family members and themselves rely on medical aid. There's a fear that if you nationalize medical aid and you take that fund and mix it with the other funds that the government has towards healthcare, that will really destroy the healthcare system. Many of the DA voters are white South Africans. They are older white South Africans. They rely on medical aid. But also people who are within the middle class who use medical aid, they rely on it, and it may have even saved their lives. And they are afraid that government hospitals are in bad condition and that you could die there. And we saw even with that one journalist earlier in the year who ended up at, was it Helen Joseph, the kind of outcry that came out from middle class South Africa around the conditions in that hospital. Middle class South Africa is used to particular standard of living, and even when they're sick, they want that particular standard of living. So many people are not in favor of the NHI, and the DA understands this. And there are some big companies such as Discovery opposed to NHI. This is the big fight. It pertains to large funds that are in hundreds of billions, maybe even trillions, in terms of how much funds people are sitting on within private healthcare. Right? Because basically these are funds that they then use to pay for doctors, medical equipment, drugs, etc., and people are paying large amounts of money. So the fight for healthcare and the future of healthcare is the big fight. And the DA is betting that if they can win the first round, then they will be able, and they will have a strategy and tactics to win the next round, the big round, which is the NHI. Another fight, which is maybe a smaller battle, is also this SAPC one. But I think the reason people are fighting so hard for BELA is actually because they are getting ready to fight about NHI. And the NHI, by the way, comes from that same committee that I told you about, the Education, Health and Science Technology subcommittee of the ANC. They also formulated this one. And it's going to be a big issue because they view it as make or break for the next election as well, whether or not they can get national health insurance. And 2024 is already done. So to get a national health insurance running at the level they want it and functional, 4 years is a short amount of time. And everybody knows this. So Friday the 13th is coming, and we'll soon know how the president responds. And this will tell us who has the upper hand. As to the question of whether will the DA leave the GNU over this, if their minister gets reshuffled or fired, I don't think they'll leave. I think it's still too early. I think they still want to stay and fight over the NHI, which is a bigger fight. And they want to see if they can weaken or get Mashatile removed in the interim. They also have a hope within the DA, a medium-term strategy. The hope of the DA is that if they win or do better in the local government elections, especially in Gauteng, that they can weaken Panyaza Lesufi and Paul Mashatile. And then that will give more space for a 2029 GNU with Mbalula and Lamula. And if they win local government elections, what that will do is open a space for Fikile Mbalula to dissolve the Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC, absorbing, those powers, putting people who are preferential to him and basically giving him the conference. So the local government elections in 2026 are going to be hot, and the DA is not going to walk away from the from the Government of National Unity now. It's too early. There are bigger fights that they want to fight. If they leave now, they also create that worst case scenario that they've said they don't want, and they told the markets that they don't want, and they told their voters was the reason why they did a deal with somebody that they had saying was the reason South Africa was in all of these problems, that they are trying to prevent a doomsday coalition of the MK, EFF, and ANC. Because if they leave, they create that space, and they create it within just 5 months of signing the GNU in and of itself. I don't think that they're going to do that. I also think John is going to stay because he's still enjoying being a minister and learning that particular part of the thing. He had to say this because you have to defend your teammate as the team leader. When you're captain of the team and they attack one of your players on the pitch, you have to run there aggressively with a Zidane type of a mentality, ready for anything. You have to, that's what's expected of you. But I don't think that he's ready to become an opposition leader in parliament again and give up the blue lights and all of that jazz. As a side conversation, there was this discussion for a little bit where they were trying to make it seem as if John is not using blue lights, not driving a fancy car. And then someone was like, no, this is the car that he's driving. But a story for another day as well. This is where things stand right now. What do you think? Do you think that the minister undermined the president or that she was fine to fight for her beliefs and this is what must happen in a coalition? Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.